Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of human history, peering into a darkness so ancient that even mountains were younger then. The world you're looking at bears no resemblance to the one you know. And in that ancient world, something walked that shouldn't have existed. This isn't fantasy. This isn't folklore. This is a story recorded in texts older than empires, whispered across continents by people who had never met, remembered by civilizations that rose and fell thousands of years before you were born. Tonight, we're hunting for giants. Not the fairy tale kind, not the bedtime story kind. We're talking about beings that ancient writers described with the same matter-of-fact tone they used to describe rivers, mountains, and wars. They wrote about them as witnesses, not storytellers. They wrote about them as if these creatures were as real as the ground beneath their feet. The trail begins with a book so old it was ancient when Jesus walked the earth. The Book of Enoch, hidden, forgotten, preserved by chance. And in its yellowed pages lies an account that makes your blood run cold. 200 angels descended to Mount Hermon, but they weren't coming to deliver messages or blessings. They came because they desired something forbidden. They looked at human women and broke the oldest law in creation. They made a pact, bound by terrible oaths, knowing full well they were shattering the boundary between heaven and earth. And then they crossed it. They took human wives, and from those impossible unions, children were born. But not human children, not angelic children, something else entirely. Something that grew enormous, something that grew hungry, something that would consume the world. The Nephilim, the fallen ones, giants who towered over ordinary humans like we tower over children, beings of unnatural strength and insatiable appetite, living proof that the cosmic order had been violated. Here's what makes this terrifying. This story isn't unique to one text or one culture. The ancient Greeks spoke of titans. The Norse described giants in Jotunheim. Hindu texts recorded the Asuras. Native American tribes across 2 continents told stories of giant beings in ancient times. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia. No contact, no communication. Yet all of them remembered the same thing. Why? Coincidence? Mass hallucination? Or memory? Memory of something so catastrophic that every culture on earth made sure their children would never forget. Genesis chapter 6 gives us fragments. The sons of God saw human women and took them as wives. The Nephilim appeared on the earth. And almost in the same breath, we're told that wickedness covered the world. Violence filled every corner. Corruption spread through all flesh like a disease. And God decided the world must be destroyed. The connection seems obvious. These beings who should never have existed triggered the greatest catastrophe in human history. The flood wasn't punishment. It was surgery. Creation itself needed to be cleansed, reset, begun again. The waters came. Mountains disappeared beneath them. Every living thing that breathed air died, including the giants. Despite their size, despite their strength, they drowned. The world was washed clean. The Nephilim were gone. Or were they? Because centuries later, when scouts approached the Promised Land, they came back with impossible reports. Giants, enormous beings who made them feel like insects. And they said something that should freeze your blood. These giants were descendants of Anak, and Anak came from the Nephilim. Wait, how? The flood destroyed everything. How could Nephilim bloodlines still exist? This question has haunted scholars for 3,000 years. Did something survive? Did the forbidden unions happen again? Or does this story mean something entirely different than we've understood? As you drift off tonight, hold these questions. Why would cultures across the entire planet tell the same story? What would it mean if superhuman beings once walked among us? And what if the reason every ancient civilization remembered them is because they had to? Because forgetting would be even more dangerous than remembering. The answers might be more disturbing than the questions, but we're going to find them together. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Meeting. When heaven touched earth. Let's travel back now to that moment when everything changed. Imagine the world as it was in those ancient days. Humanity had multiplied across the earth. Cities were being built. Civilization was developing. But something was about to happen that would alter the course of history forever. The Book of Enoch gives us names. It tells us that the leader of the 200 angels was called Semjaza, though different ancient manuscripts spell his name in various ways. He wasn't acting on impulse. According to the text, he understood the gravity of what they were considering. He knew that descending to earth and taking human wives would violate their very nature as heavenly beings. He feared bearing the guilt alone. So Semjaza proposed something. He gathered the other angels who shared his desire, and he suggested they all swear an oath together. They would bind themselves mutually to this plan. That way, none could back out. None could change their mind. They would all be equally guilty, equally committed. Shared sin would protect each participant. The text tells us they gathered on Mount Hermon. This detail matters. Hermon is a real mountain, a towering peak in the region that became Israel's northern boundary. Its name likely comes from a root word meaning devoted or sacred. It was a high place, a location where earth reached toward heaven. And it was there that these 200 angels bound themselves with terrible oaths. Think about what an oath meant in the ancient world. This wasn't like a casual promise we might make today. Oaths invoked divine witness. They called down curses upon anyone who broke them. By swearing together, these angels created a bond stronger than individual resolve. They locked themselves into a course of action that couldn't be undone. The oath complete, they descended. They left their proper dwelling place in the heavens. They came to earth, took physical form somehow, and chose wives from among human women. The text describes how each angel selected women who pleased him. And from these unions, children were conceived. Now here's something that challenges our understanding. How could spiritual beings, angels who exist in the heavenly realm, produce children with physical humans? The mechanics puzzle theologians to this day. Some suggest the angels possessed or inhabited human bodies. Others propose they materialized physical forms for themselves. The ancient text doesn't explain the process. It simply states what happened. What's certain is that these children were different. They weren't fully human, but they weren't fully angelic either. They were something new, something that shouldn't exist, a violation of the created order, where everything was supposed to reproduce according to its kind. The Bible itself, in Genesis chapter 6, uses specific terminology. It calls the divine beings sons of God. This exact phrase appears in only a few places in Hebrew scripture. Most notably, it shows up in the book of Job, where the sons of God present themselves before the Lord, and Satan comes among them. In that context, these sons of God are clearly heavenly beings, members of the divine council, angels standing in God's presence. This has led many interpreters throughout history to conclude that Genesis describes the same thing. Angelic beings looking at human women, finding them desirable, and acting on that desire. The straightforward reading of the text suggests this. If the passage just meant human men marrying human women, why use such unusual language? Why call them sons of God instead of sons of men? The deliberate distinction implies a distinction in nature. Now, if you're finding this exploration of ancient mysteries thought-provoking, this would be a perfect time to hit that like button. It helps others discover these stories too. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more content that makes you think while helping you relax. Your support means I can keep creating these deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. Ancient Jewish tradition strongly supported this interpretation. The scholars who translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek centuries before Jesus chose specific words. Some manuscripts rendered sons of God as angels of God. They understood the passage to describe heavenly beings. The Book of Enoch, widely read and respected in that era, elaborated the story in extensive detail. Early Jewish commentators treated the angel interpretation as obvious, requiring no special justification. The early Christian church largely agreed. Important church fathers like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, and Tertullian all taught that fallen angels had taken human wives. They saw this as consistent with other scriptures mentioning angels who left their proper dwelling. They viewed it as the natural reading of Genesis. But an alternative interpretation emerged, particularly in later Jewish and Christian thought. According to this view, sons of God meant righteous men from the lineage of Seth, Adam's third son. The daughters of men were women from the line of Cain, whose offering God rejected and who wandered after taking his brother's life. This interpretation focuses on the broader context of early Genesis. The text traces two family lines from Adam. Cain's line developed cities and culture, but moved away from God. Seth's line maintained worship and righteousness. Genesis notes that in Seth's grandson's time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. The Sethite line represented those who remained faithful. From this perspective, sons of God simply means godly men, followers of the Creator. The sin wasn't forbidden angelic human union. It was the intermarriage between righteous and unrighteous people. When godly families united with ungodly families, spiritual boundaries eroded. Righteous people compromised their faith by joining with those who didn't worship God. This led to widespread corruption. This view appeals to those uncomfortable with the idea of angels engaging in physical reproduction. Angels, in most theological frameworks, are spirit beings without physical bodies or biological functions. How could they father children? The question seems to present an impossible problem. Therefore, the passage must refer to something more ordinary, more within normal human experience. But here's the challenge this interpretation faces. Why would children from such marriages be described as Nephilim, as giants and mighty warriors? If godly men simply married ungodly women, why would their offspring be any different from normal humans? The union of two human parents, regardless of spiritual state, should produce ordinary human children. Yet the text explicitly states these children became heroes of old, warriors of renown, beings who stood apart from common humanity. The supernatural interpretation provides a clear explanation. The mixing of angelic and human nature produced something unprecedented. These hybrid beings inherited strength, knowledge, and capabilities far exceeding normal human limits. They became the giants that legends remember. What do you think? Do you find the angel interpretation more convincing? Or does the Sethite view make more sense to you? This is one of those ancient mysteries where thoughtful people disagree. There's no obvious answer that satisfies every question. Both interpretations have strengths and challenges, and perhaps that ambiguity is intentional, inviting each generation to wrestle with the text and draw their own conclusions. Coming up, we'll explore what these angels allegedly taught humanity, knowledge that should have remained hidden. But for now, consider this. Whether these were literal angels or simply powerful humans, the result was the same. Boundaries were crossed. Something entered the world that didn't belong, and everything spiraled toward catastrophe. The story reminds us that not all boundaries exist to limit us. Some exist to protect us, to maintain an order that keeps creation functioning properly. What happens when those protective boundaries dissolve? We're about to find out. Chapter 3. The Forbidden Teachers. Secrets from beyond. The angels who descended didn't just take wives and father children. According to the Book of Enoch, they brought something else with them, something perhaps even more dangerous than their forbidden unions. They brought knowledge, secrets from the heavenly realm, information that humanity wasn't meant to possess, and they taught these secrets to humans, fundamentally changing civilization in the process. The text names specific angels and describes what each one taught. Azazel stands out as particularly significant. His name appears in the book of Leviticus in connection with the Day of Atonement ritual, where one goat is sent to Azazel in the wilderness. The Book of Enoch transforms this cryptic reference into the name of a chief fallen angel, one whose teachings would prove catastrophic. Azazel taught humans how to make swords, knives, shields, and armor. He showed them techniques of mining, of extracting metal from ore, of heating and hammering and shaping bronze and iron. Before his instruction, humanity fought with stone and wood. After his teaching, they possessed materials that held sharper edges and formed stronger weapons. Think about what this meant. Metal weapons transformed warfare completely. They made combat deadlier. They allowed battles to last longer because weapons didn't break as easily. They enabled the creation of professional warrior classes, people who could afford better equipment and therefore dominated others. Violence became more organized, more efficient, more total. But Azazel taught more than warfare. The text credits him with introducing jewelry, ornaments, cosmetics, and the art of beautifying the eyes. He showed people how to enhance their appearance, how to make themselves more attractive, how to employ adornment for seduction. These teachings might seem less obviously harmful than weapon making, but Enoch treats them as equally corrupting. The concern wasn't beauty itself. The issue was cultivating vanity and lust. External adornment focused attention on surface rather than character. It encouraged people to value appearance over inner qualities. It fed sexual appetites and led to the very immorality that produced the Nephilim. The cosmetic arts enabled and accelerated corruption spreading through humanity. Other angels contributed their own specialties. Armaros taught the releasing of enchantments and the cutting of roots, suggesting herbalism with magical applications. Barakijal taught the observation of stars, introducing astrology. Kokabel taught knowledge of the constellations. Tamiel taught astronomy. Asradel taught the courses of the moon. Each field of knowledge had dual potential. Herbs could heal or harm. Stars could guide navigation or become objects of worship. The lunar cycle could inform agriculture or serve divination. The angels taught truth, but truth put to wrong purposes. They gave humanity information without wisdom, power without ethics. The teaching of sorcery and divination proved particularly dangerous. These arts claimed to access spiritual realities, to manipulate unseen forces, to predict and control future events. They represented humanity reaching beyond its proper sphere, attempting to grasp powers that belong to higher orders of being. The practice of magic opened channels to spiritual entities, often malevolent ones. If you're enjoying this exploration and it's helping you think deeply as you rest, consider sharing this video with friends or family who might appreciate it too. These ancient stories have fascinated people for thousands of years, and they still have the power to make us wonder and question today. The Book of Enoch treats this transfer of knowledge as a fundamental violation. The angels possessed understanding appropriate to their angelic nature. Humans were meant to develop according to their human nature. By sharing angelic knowledge with humans, the Watchers accelerated human capabilities beyond human wisdom. They created a dangerous imbalance. Imagine giving a child access to powerful tools before teaching judgment and restraint. The child might build something wonderful or might cause tremendous harm. The tool itself is neutral. The problem lies in the mismatch between capability and maturity. Humanity gained angelic knowledge while retaining human weakness, and the combination proved catastrophic. The text suggests that natural human development would have been slower but healthier. People would have discovered metallurgy eventually, but over generations, with time to develop ethical frameworks for its use. They might have learned astronomy through patient observation, slowly building understanding piece by piece. The Watchers short-circuited this process, dumping advanced knowledge into unprepared minds. Azazel's particular guilt earned him special punishment. The archangel Raphael received orders to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into darkness. Specifically, he was to be thrown into a desert place full of rough and jagged rocks, covered with darkness, where he would remain until the day of judgment. Then he would be cast into eternal fire. The punishment fit the crime. Azazel brought destructive knowledge to light. Therefore he was bound in darkness. He taught warfare and violence. Therefore he was cast among rough stones. He corrupted creation. Therefore he awaited final destruction. The sentence was severe because the offense was severe. He didn't merely sin himself, but taught sin to countless others. This raises questions that remain relevant today. Is all knowledge good to possess? Are there things we're better off not knowing? Does understanding how to do something mean we should do it? These aren't merely ancient concerns. Every generation faces them anew. Consider modern examples. We've learned to split atoms, giving us nuclear energy, but also nuclear weapons. We've developed genetic engineering, offering potential cures, but also raising questions about human modification. We've created artificial intelligence, promising tremendous benefits, but carrying serious risks. In each case, we've gained capability faster than we've developed wisdom about how to use it responsibly. The story of Azazel and the forbidden knowledge reminds us that information alone isn't enough. We need wisdom to guide how we apply what we know. We need ethics to direct our capabilities toward good rather than harm. Power without responsibility leads to catastrophe. Knowledge without character produces corruption. The teaching of forbidden knowledge also helps explain why divine response was so severe. The flood wasn't just necessary to eliminate hybrid beings. It had to cleanse a corrupted culture. Humanity had learned things it shouldn't know, developed capabilities it couldn't handle responsibly, and opened spiritual doors it couldn't close. Only complete destruction and starting over could address such thorough contamination. Yet the knowledge didn't entirely disappear. Noah and his family carried it forward after the flood. They remembered metallurgy, astronomy, agriculture, all the useful arts. The difference was the changed context. After the flood, humanity had witnessed the consequences of misusing knowledge. They had seen where corruption led. They carried the memory of judgment. This memory, in theory, would encourage wiser use of the same capabilities. But as we'll see, human nature didn't fundamentally change. The same tendencies toward violence, vanity, and rebellion that characterized the world before the flood would resurface. The knowledge the angels taught continued enabling both good and evil. Metal could form plowshares or swords. Stars could guide travelers or become idols. Herbs could heal the sick or poison enemies. Coming up next, we'll explore what happened when the children of these unions grew to maturity. The Nephilim didn't just possess forbidden knowledge. They became physical embodiments of corruption, beings whose appetites and violence would push creation to the breaking point. But take a moment now to let these ideas settle. Think about knowledge and wisdom, power and responsibility, capability and character. The ancient story speaks to concerns that have never stopped being relevant. Chapter 4: The Giants Awaken, Birth of the Nephilim. The children born from the unions between the Watchers and human women grew rapidly. They didn't experience normal human development. According to the accounts preserved in the Book of Enoch, these beings matured quickly into their adult forms, and those forms were extraordinary and terrifying. The ancient sources give varying measurements for their size. Some traditions describe them as reaching impossibly vast heights, while others provide more modest but still remarkable estimates. Most conservative interpretations suggest they stood between 15 and 30 feet tall. Imagine standing next to someone twice or 3 times your height. Every aspect of them would seem magnified. Their arms longer, their stride wider, their reach extending far beyond yours. The physical disparity alone would be overwhelming. But their size was only part of what made them different. These beings possessed strength far exceeding normal human capacity. The biblical text calls them Gibborim, a Hebrew word meaning mighty warriors or champions. They weren't just large. They were powerful in ways that set them completely apart from ordinary people. Stories were told about their feats. Their names became known. Fame surrounded them. Yet this fame was dark. The context makes clear that the world in which the Nephilim lived was descending into chaos. Violence filled the earth. human hearts inclined constantly toward evil. The presence of these mighty beings didn't bring order or protection. Their power contributed to the problem rather than solving anything. Consider what mighty warriors do in a world without law. They take what they want. They dominate the weak. They establish themselves through force. Strength without righteousness becomes oppression. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. The Nephilim may have been heroes in the sense of great warriors, but their heroism served themselves rather than justice. The Book of Enoch describes their appetites as insatiable. Normal food supplies couldn't sustain them. They consumed all the grain that human communities had stored. They slaughtered and devoured livestock. They drank milk meant for children. Nothing satisfied their hunger for long. Their needs exceeded what human agriculture and animal husbandry could provide. Communities that had fed themselves adequately suddenly faced starvation because giants had devoured everything. The careful balance between human population and food supply collapsed under the weight of these impossible beings. When grain stores ran empty, when livestock had been eaten, the giants turned to hunting wild animals. They ranged through forests and across plains, capturing and consuming every creature they could catch. The text records that they ate birds, fish, wild beasts, every living thing. The animal population began declining under the pressure of their predation. But even this proved insufficient. According to Enoch, when all other food sources were exhausted, the giants began doing something unthinkable. They turned to eating humans. Let that sink in for a moment. These beings, partly descended from humans themselves, began consuming people. The violation went beyond physical violence into spiritual abomination. Humans, created in the divine image, became prey for these monstrous hybrids. The boundary between predator and prey, which should never have included humans in the prey category, was utterly demolished. If you're still with me on this journey, if these ancient mysteries are making you think, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Does this story sound like ancient memory of something real, or does it sound like mythology with symbolic meaning? What do you think the text is trying to tell us? Share your perspective below. The text indicates the violence didn't stop with giants preying on humans. The giants also turned on one another. When even human flesh ran short, when their hunger remained unsatisfied, the Nephilim began consuming each other. Giant fought giant. The strong devoured the weak. Cannibalism became normal practice among beings who recognized no limits, acknowledged no taboos, honored no bonds. This cascade of violence explains the biblical statement that the earth was filled with violence. The Hebrew word translated as violence is Hamas, which carries connotations of wrong, cruelty, injustice, and ruthlessness. The giants embodied this concept completely. They took what didn't belong to them. They destroyed without cause. They showed no mercy to the weak. Their existence was defined by predation and consumption. The earth itself groaned under this oppression. Enoch personifies the planet as crying out in complaint. The ground that had received Abel's innocent blood now received the blood of countless victims. The soil meant to bring forth food instead absorbed violence. Creation, which had been pronounced good at the beginning, became a place of suffering and terror because of the giants walking upon it. Human civilization broke down completely. How could communities function when giants might attack at any moment? How could people plant crops knowing that giants would consume them before harvest? How could families feel safe when their children might become food for monsters? The normal patterns of life, agriculture, trade, worship, all collapsed under the constant threat. The mighty men, the heroes of renown mentioned in Genesis, were not protectors. They were apex predators. Their fame came from fear rather than admiration. Stories were told about them because their actions were so terrible they couldn't be forgotten. They became legendary not because people honored them, but because their victims needed to remember the horror, to preserve the warning for future generations. The psychological impact would have been devastating. Imagine living in constant fear, watching loved ones taken and consumed, feeling utterly helpless against beings you couldn't possibly fight. Society didn't just experience violence, it experienced systematic predation that reduced humans to the level of prey animals. Some humans likely collaborated with the giants, perhaps thinking cooperation would save them. Maybe they hoped to gain favor with the powerful by serving them. The text doesn't detail such collaboration, but it would be consistent with human behavior under extreme duress. In any case, corruption spread through all flesh, not just through the giants themselves. The situation was unsustainable. If the giants continued eating humans, eventually no humans would remain. Then the giants would have only each other to consume. They would destroy themselves through their own appetites, leaving the world empty or populated only by the last surviving giant. But before that final catastrophe could occur, intervention came from above. The cries of the suffering reached beyond earth. The prayers of victims rose to heaven, and heaven responded. Coming up, we'll explore how the divine council reacted to this horror, what judgment was decreed, and why the solution required drowning the entire world. For now, rest knowing that even in the darkest moments of this ancient story, suffering was not ignored, and justice, though delayed, was coming. Chapter 5. The world breaks apart. Violence and corruption. The world in the days before the flood had descended into a state difficult for us to fully imagine. The biblical text describes it with stark, absolute language. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. Read those words carefully. Every inclination, only evil, continually. This isn't describing occasional wrongdoing or isolated incidents of sin. This is total corruption affecting every thought, every heart, every person. The Hebrew words pile up to convey completeness. No corner of human consciousness remained untainted. No person stood apart from the corruption except for Noah and his immediate family. The presence of the Nephilim intensified and embodied this corruption. They were living proof of boundaries violated, of creation's order undone. Their very existence demonstrated how far the world had fallen from its intended state. These mighty warriors, these beings of renown, represented not the peak of human achievement, but its perversion. They had power without righteousness, strength without wisdom, fame built on foundations of violence. Genesis tells us that the earth was corrupt before God and filled with violence. That word corrupt in Hebrew suggests something ruined, spoiled, destroyed. It's the same word used to describe rotting or decaying. Creation itself had become corrupted, infected with a spiritual and moral rot that affected all flesh. The connection between the Nephilim and this universal corruption is implied rather than stated explicitly. The text doesn't say, "Because of the Nephilim, I will destroy the earth." Instead, it presents a sequence. The Nephilim appear. The sons of God take wives from humans. Giants are born. Violence fills the earth. Corruption spreads through all flesh. Judgment is decreed. The literary structure links these elements even without making the causal relationship explicit. Ancient interpreters made that relationship explicit in their expansions of the story. The Book of Enoch directly connects the actions of the fallen angels and the violence of their giant offspring to the decision to flood the world. According to that text, human suffering became so severe that cries reached to heaven itself, and the archangels brought these complaints before God. The text describes how 4 archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, heard the distress. They saw the violence perpetrated by the giants. They witnessed the corruption taught by the Watchers. They heard desperate prayers from humans being hunted and consumed. And they brought the matter before the divine throne, asking for intervention, for justice, for rescue. This intercession matters. It shows that heaven remained aware of earth despite the rebellion. The corruption didn't isolate humanity from divine concern. Prayer was heard. Suffering was noted. The archangels, remaining faithful to their appointed tasks, carried the cries of creation to the throne of judgment. God's response came in multiple parts, a comprehensive plan addressing every element of the corruption. First, Uriel received instructions to warn Noah. The one righteous man would be told about the coming flood. He would receive specifications for building an ark. Time would be given to prepare, to gather his family, to save representatives of animal life. Mercy would be extended to the household that had not participated in corruption. Second, Raphael received orders regarding Azazel. The fallen angel who taught weapon making would be bound hand and foot, thrown into darkness among rough stones, imprisoned until the day of final judgment, when he would be cast into eternal fire. The punishment would be both immediate and eschatological, confinement now, destruction later. Third, Gabriel was sent to deal with the Nephilim themselves. The giants would be set against each other. Father would fight son, brother would battle brother. They would destroy one another in mutual violence before the flood came. The beings who lived by consumption would die consuming each other. Fourth, Michael received instructions about Semjaza and his fellow Watchers. They would be bound beneath the hills of the earth for 70 generations, forced to watch in spiritual torment as their offspring destroyed each other and then were themselves destroyed in the flood. After those 70 generations, they would face eternal punishment. Now, before we go further, I want to ask you something. If you're finding value in this deep exploration of ancient texts and mysteries, would you take a moment to like this video? It truly helps more people discover these stories. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider joining this community of curious minds who love exploring history's greatest mysteries together. The judgment was comprehensive and inescapable. The Watchers would be imprisoned. Their children would destroy themselves before drowning in the flood. Azazel would be bound separately due to his particular guilt. And humanity would be reduced to one family from which a new beginning could emerge. Every element of the corruption would be addressed. Every participant would face consequences. The decree that giants would war among themselves is particularly striking. These beings had already turned to cannibalism under pressure of hunger. Now they would be driven to civil war, fighting each other as the world grew more hostile. Perhaps the earth stopped yielding food. Perhaps remaining animals all fled or died. Whatever the mechanism, the giants found themselves with only each other as resources. Meanwhile, God's declaration came to humanity. "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. This wasn't setting a maximum human lifespan. This was a deadline, a countdown. 120 years remained before judgment would fall. Time was given for repentance, for change, for anyone to turn from wickedness. According to tradition, Noah spent those 120 years building the ark and preaching righteousness. The Apostle Peter calls him a herald of righteousness, suggesting Noah warned his generation about coming judgment. He explained what was coming. He told them why. He urged them to turn from their wicked ways. And for 120 years, they ignored him. Think about that. For more than a century, visible evidence sat before them. A massive boat being constructed far from any body of water large enough to float it. A righteous man and his family working day after day, warning anyone who would listen. Physical proof that something unprecedented was approaching. And yet the people mocked. They dismissed the warnings. They continued in their corruption. The countdown continued. 120 years became 100, then 50, then 10, then 1. Finally, the day arrived. Noah and his family entered the ark. Animals came in pairs and sevens, drawn by divine direction. The door was shut, and then the fountains of the great deep burst forth. The windows of the heavens opened. Water came from above and below simultaneously. The world that had been corrupted beyond redemption was being unmade. The chaos that was ordered at creation's beginning was returning. Everything that breathed air would die. The Nephilim, those mighty warriors, those heroes of old, those beings of renown and power, they would perish with everything else. Their strength wouldn't save them. Their size made no difference. Their fame meant nothing when the waters rose above the highest mountains. The flood served multiple purposes. It was judgment on wickedness. It was removal of corruption. It was cleansing of creation. And it was mercy to those who would come after, giving humanity a fresh start, a world reset, an opportunity to live as they were meant to live. Coming up next, we'll explore what happened after the waters receded. The world began again. But did the story of the giants truly end? Did the Nephilim vanish completely? Or did something of them survive? The mystery continues, and the questions become even more intriguing as we move forward through history. Chapter 6. Heaven's Response. The flood decision. The decision to flood the earth was not made hastily. The biblical narrative makes this clear through its careful pacing. God looked at the world and saw the depth of its corruption. He grieved. The text uses remarkably emotional language. God was sorry that he had made humankind, and it grieved him to his heart. Whether we interpret this language literally or as accommodation to human understanding, it conveys something profound. The state of the world provoked a deep divine response. Creation had gone so wrong that its creator regretted making it. That regret prompted a decision. I will blot out from the earth the human beings I have created. people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. The judgment would be comprehensive. Not just humanity, but all flesh would be swept away. Why? Because the corruption had spread through the entire created order. The earth itself was described as corrupt. Something about the situation required not just punishment of guilty individuals, but cleansing of the whole system. This seems harsh to modern sensibilities. We might ask, why couldn't God just destroy the giants and the wicked humans while preserving the innocent and the animal kingdom? Why was such complete destruction necessary? The text suggests that corruption had become so total, so deeply embedded in every aspect of existence, that only comprehensive cleansing could address it. Think of it like a contamination that has spread throughout an entire system. Sometimes the only solution is to flush the entire system and start fresh. The corruption wasn't just moral choices individuals were making. It was something that had infected the very fabric of creation. The boundaries that kept creation functioning properly had dissolved. The categories that maintained order had been violated. If the sons of God had indeed taken human wives, if hybrids now walked the earth, then creation's fundamental structure had been compromised. The order established at the beginning, where everything reproduced according to its kind, had been undone. This wasn't just about punishing bad behavior. It was about restoring right categories, re-establishing proper boundaries, returning creation to its intended state. One exception existed amid the universal corruption. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. One man remained righteous. One family had not joined the wickedness. Through this family, humanity would continue. Through this family, God's purposes would be preserved, but only one family out of all the people on earth. The proportion reveals how complete the corruption had become. The 120-year warning period takes on greater significance in this light. It wasn't merely a countdown to destruction. It was time for the corruption to become undeniable, for every opportunity to be exhausted, for the righteous to be revealed as distinct from the wicked. When the waters finally came, no one could claim surprise. No one could argue that insufficient warning had been given. Noah's ark construction provided visible testimony for decades. Far from any ocean or river capable of floating such a vessel, a man and his family built a massive boat. They gathered materials, they shaped wood, they sealed seams, all the while explaining why. All the while warning neighbors, all the while offering evidence that something unprecedented was coming. According to later traditions, the people mocked Noah's warnings. How could a flood come? Where would the water originate? The sky had never produced rain in such quantities before. The world had never experienced anything like what Noah described. His claims seemed absurd. His vessel seemed unnecessary. His warnings fell on deaf ears. If you're still awake and thinking about these ancient accounts, I'm curious. What do you make of the flood story? Does it sound like historical memory of a real catastrophe? Or does it speak to you more as a powerful metaphor about corruption and renewal? Share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing different perspectives on these timeless stories. But the countdown continued regardless of mockery or disbelief. 120 years, then 100, then 50, then 10, then 1. Finally, the appointed day arrived. The account in Genesis describes it with careful detail. Noah and his family entered the ark. The animals came, drawn by some divine impulse, entering in their appointed pairs and sevens. Then the Lord shut the door. Note that detail. God shut the door. Noah didn't close it himself. The divine hand sealed them in, making the separation complete. Those inside were saved. Those outside were doomed. And then the waters came. The description suggests a catastrophe from both above and below. The fountains of the great deep burst forth, water erupting from beneath the earth. The windows of the heavens opened, rain falling in torrents from above. The world was caught between two walls of water, squeezed by forces unleashing simultaneously from every direction. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain fell. The waters rose steadily, lifting the ark, covering the lowlands, then the hills, finally, even the highest mountains. Everything that breathed air died. The text repeats this fact with emphasis. All flesh died. Everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. Only Noah and those with him in the ark remained alive. The Nephilim, despite their size and strength, drowned along with everything else. Their mighty power couldn't save them. They couldn't swim to safety. There was no safety to reach. They couldn't build their own vessels. The time for that had passed. They experienced what all other flesh experienced: the water rising, the air disappearing, the inevitable end. The flood served as the ultimate equalizer. Giant and ordinary human, strong and weak, rich and poor, all faced the same fate. The waters made no distinctions. Everything under heaven died. The world that had existed since creation was unmade, returned to a watery chaos similar to what existed before the divine words first brought order. But the ark floated safely above the destruction. Inside were 8 humans, representatives of animal kinds, seeds for plants, everything needed to restart creation. This was destruction with purpose, judgment with an eye toward restoration, an ending that made possible a new beginning. The waters prevailed for 150 days. Imagine that. For 5 months, everything was submerged. The world existed as nothing but water and sky, with one vessel floating between them, carrying the future. Then the waters began to recede. The fountains of the deep were closed. The rain stopped. Wind passed over the earth, and the waters steadily lowered. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. More time passed as the waters continued decreasing. Noah sent out birds to test for dry land. Finally, more than a year after they entered, God told Noah to come out of the ark. They emerged into a world cleansed, empty, ready to begin again. The first thing Noah did was build an altar and offer sacrifices. The text says, "The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and declared in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth. Nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done." That last phrase is crucial. God acknowledged that human nature hadn't fundamentally changed. The flood hadn't made humans perfect. The inclination toward evil remained. Yet God promised never to repeat this particular judgment. The rainbow appeared as a sign of that covenant, a reminder that creation would continue despite human failings. The world began again, but questions remained. Did everything corrupted by the Nephilim truly end? Were all the giants destroyed? As we'll discover next, the story takes a surprising turn when we reach the book of Numbers, hundreds of years after the flood. Chapter 7. After the waters. Did giants return? The waters receded. The earth dried. Noah and his family began rebuilding human civilization. The world had been cleansed. The giants were gone. The corruption had been washed away. A fresh start lay before humanity. Yet centuries later, when the descendants of Abraham approached the Promised Land, scouts brought back a report that should have been impossible. The Book of Numbers records this crucial moment. Moses sent 12 spies to explore the land of Canaan. These weren't timid men. They were leaders of the tribes, experienced and capable. They spent 40 days examining the territory, observing its peoples, assessing its defenses. When they returned, they brought both good news and terrifying news. The land was indeed rich, flowing with milk and honey, just as God had promised. The spies brought back enormous clusters of grapes, so large that 2 men had to carry them on a pole between them. The soil was fertile. The resources were abundant. On this point, all 12 agreed. But 10 of the 12 also reported that conquest was impossible. The cities were fortified, the inhabitants were powerful, and most disturbing, giants lived there. The spies used specific language. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Let that statement sink in. The Nephilim. After the flood destroyed all flesh that breathed air. After only Noah's family survived. After no giants were on the ark. How could Nephilim descendants be walking in Canaan generations later? The text doesn't explain. It simply reports what the spies claimed they saw. This creates a significant problem for interpreters. Several theories attempt to resolve this puzzle. One suggests the spies were wrong or exaggerating. Perhaps they saw very tall people and assumed they were related to the legendary Nephilim. Fear made them interpret unusual size as supernatural origin. They connected what they saw to ancient stories, making an assumption rather than reporting confirmed fact. This interpretation gains support from the broader context. The 10 spies were trying to discourage the people from entering Canaan. They wanted to make conquest seem impossible, claiming that giants lived there, specifically descendants of the pre-flood Nephilim, would terrify the people. And it worked. The entire community wept and refused to proceed. Another theory suggests that the forbidden unions between sons of God and daughters of men occurred again after the flood. If it happened once, perhaps it could happen twice. Maybe fallen angels or imprisoned watchers acting through demons somehow produced hybrid offspring again. The Anakim and other giant clans represented a second attempt at the same corruption. A third explanation focuses on genetics. Perhaps Noah's family carried recessive genes from the pre-flood world. If Nephilim had interbred with humans over many generations before the flood, their genetic legacy might have dispersed through the human population. Most people would show no unusual traits, but occasionally, genes would combine, producing individuals of exceptional size. This theory treats post-flood giants as humans with genetic abnormalities rather than supernatural hybrids. They were very tall people, possibly suffering from conditions like gigantism caused by pituitary disorders. Ancient peoples seeing individuals 9 or 10 feet tall naturally connected them to legendary Nephilim. The connection was cultural and interpretive rather than literally genetic from pre-flood giants. What's your take on this mystery? How do you think giants could appear after the flood destroyed them all? Was it exaggeration by frightened spies, a second supernatural corruption, or simply very tall humans connected to legends? Drop your thoughts in the comments. These are the kinds of questions that have fascinated people for thousands of years. The biblical text itself offers some clues. The giants in Canaan weren't directly called Nephilim everywhere. They had different names: Anakim, Emim, Zamzumim, Rephaim. These were distinct groups with their own identities. Only the fearful spies in Numbers made the direct connection to Nephilim. The biblical narrator didn't confirm it as fact. Yet the text treats these giants as real, not as exaggeration. Deuteronomy records specific details about Og, king of Bashan, described as the last of the Rephaim. His bed measured 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, roughly 13.5 feet by 6 feet. Either Og was extraordinarily large, or the bed was oversized for other reasons, but the text preserves the measurement as evidence of his unusual stature. Other passages similarly treat the giants as actual beings of remarkable size. The Anakim made the spies feel like grasshoppers. Goliath, the champion from Gath, stood over 9 feet tall. These aren't vague references to large people. They're specific measurements suggesting individuals far exceeding normal human height. The presence of giants in Canaan became a test of faith. Would the people trust divine promises, or would they fear human obstacles? The 10 spies chose fear. They saw the giants and concluded conquest was impossible. The people believed them and refused to enter the land. This failure of faith cost that generation their opportunity. They would wander 40 years in the wilderness until all the adults had died. Only Caleb and Joshua, the 2 faithful spies, argued for proceeding. They acknowledged the giants, but insisted God would give victory. Their faith contrasted with the fear of their colleagues. They saw the same giants, but interpreted them differently. To the 10, the giants proved the land was unconquerable. To the 2, the giants were merely obstacles that God would overcome. The grasshopper comparison captures the psychological impact perfectly. Standing next to someone twice your height creates an overwhelming size difference. Everything about them appears magnified. The physical disparity translates to perceived power disparity. Normal humans feel inadequate in comparison. This feeling affected even experienced warriors. The sight of the Anakim reduced them to feeling like insects. The biblical text treats this terror as both understandable and faithless. Yes, the giants were intimidating. Yes, they presented real military challenges. But God had promised victory. He had demonstrated his power through the plagues in Egypt, through the crossing of the Red Sea, through provision in the wilderness. Trust should have overcome fear. The giants should have been viewed as opportunities to witness divine power, rather than as insurmountable obstacles. Later conquest narratives record battles against giant clans. Joshua would drive the Anakim from most territories. Some survived in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. From these remnants would come champions like Goliath generations later. The giant bloodlines persisted for centuries, slowly diminishing but never entirely eliminated during the biblical period. Whether these post-flood giants were literally related to pre-flood Nephilim, or were simply large humans whose stature evoked ancient legends, they served similar narrative purposes. They represented threats that seemed overwhelming to human strength. They tested faith in divine promises. They marked moments when people had to choose between trusting God or yielding to fear. The mystery of how Nephilim appeared after the flood remains unresolved in Scripture. The text presents the puzzle without fully solving it, leaving room for interpretation and wonder. What's clear is that the presence of giants, whatever their origin, continued affecting Israel's story long after the waters of judgment had dried. Coming up, we'll explore the final battles against these remaining giants and what their defeat meant for the ancient world. Chapter 8: The Final Battles, Joshua, David, and Victory. When the next generation of Israelites, trained in faith through 40 years of wilderness wandering, finally entered Canaan under Joshua's leadership, they faced the giants their parents had feared. But unlike their parents, they moved forward. The conquest narratives record systematic campaigns against the giant clans. The book of Joshua states that Joshua struck down the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah and Israel. The text emphasizes completeness. Joshua left none remaining. The giant populations were targeted and eliminated from the territories that would belong to Israel, but not entirely. Joshua notes that some Anakim remained in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod, Philistine cities outside Israel's full control. This detail matters tremendously because centuries later, it would be Gath that produced Israel's most famous giant enemy. The confrontation between David and Goliath unfolds in the valley of Elah. The Philistine champion stood, according to most Hebrew manuscripts, 6 cubits and a span tall, between 9 and 10 feet. Some ancient Greek manuscripts give a shorter measurement of 4 cubits and a span, closer to 6 or 7 feet. Regardless of the exact height, Goliath was significantly larger than normal soldiers. He wore armor weighing 5,000 shekels of bronze. His spear shaft resembled a weaver's beam, a comparison suggesting both thickness and weight. He represented not just physical threat, but psychological warfare. For 40 days, he challenged Israel to send a champion to face him in single combat. For 40 days, the army, including King Saul, cowered in fear. Then David arrived, a young shepherd bringing supplies to his brothers. He heard Goliath's challenge. He asked questions. When he learned no one had accepted the challenge, he volunteered. Saul was skeptical. David was young and inexperienced. Goliath was a warrior from his youth. But David insisted, recounting how God had delivered him from lions and bears while protecting sheep. God would deliver him from this Philistine who defied the armies of the living God. The famous battle was brief. David refused Saul's armor, choosing instead his shepherd's tools, staff, sling, 5 smooth stones. Goliath mocked him. David proclaimed that the battle belonged to the Lord. 1 stone from the sling struck Goliath in the forehead. The giant fell. David used Goliath's own sword to finish him. The Philistines fled. Israel won a great victory. Why did David choose 5 stones when he only needed 1? Some interpreters have wondered about this detail. Later passages in 2 Samuel reveal part of the answer. Goliath had brothers, also giants, who would appear in subsequent battles. David may have been prepared to face all of them if necessary. The text records 3 more battles against Goliath's relatives. Ishbi-Benob, carrying a spear weighing 300 shekels and wearing new armor, fought against David but fell to Abishai. Saph died at Gob. Another giant with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits total, was killed by David's nephew Jonathan. All were described as descendants of the Rephaim. All fell to David's warriors. If you're enjoying this journey through these ancient battles and mysteries, this is a great time to share this video with someone who loves history and biblical stories. These accounts have inspired people for thousands of years, and they still have power to move us today. The pattern is clear. Giants clustered in specific locations. They served as champions for Philistine armies. They represented the last genetic echoes of that ancient corruption, isolated in pockets, diminishing with each generation. The conquest wasn't completed in one campaign. It required persistent effort across multiple generations. But slowly, methodically, the giant bloodlines were eliminated. The Book of Amos contains a curious passage that suggests deeper significance to this elimination. God reminds the people that he destroyed the Amorites before them. Yet their height was like the height of cedars, and they were as strong as oaks. I destroyed their fruit above and their roots beneath. This language implies the conquest involved more than just military campaigns. It represented a systematic removal of these bloodlines from the earth, both their present representatives, fruit above, and their future potential, roots beneath. Some scholars propose these giants suffered from medical conditions. Acromegaly and pituitary gigantism can produce exceptional height. Such conditions often come with weakened bones and shortened lifespans. This might explain why the giants, despite their size, consistently fell in battle. Their stature gave them presence, but not necessarily combat advantage. Others note that ancient Near Eastern texts frequently employed giant imagery for enemies. The Egyptians described their foes as enormous to magnify their own victories. The question becomes whether these accounts describe literal giants or use literary convention to emphasize the magnitude of challenges overcome. The archaeological record provides mixed evidence. No confirmed skeletal remains of 9-foot humans have been found in Canaan from the relevant periods. However, the consistent geographical references to giant populations in specific cities suggest some historical kernel. The Anakim, at minimum, appear to have been exceptionally tall people, even if not literally 10 feet in height. What remains certain in the biblical narrative is consistency. Giant clans occupied the land. They opposed the conquest. They fell one by one until only scattered individuals remained. By the time of King David, they had become rare enough that each encounter merited special recording. After David's reign, they vanished from the biblical record entirely. The last of the giants passed from the earth. Their cities were taken. Their names became memories and warnings. The bloodline that survived the flood, if such it was, finally met its end in the valleys and hills of ancient Israel. The story that began with angels descending to Mount Hermon concluded with the defeat of the final giant warriors. Creation was cleansed of that ancient corruption, allowing God's purposes for his people to move forward unhindered. Coming up, we'll explore a fascinating question. Why do giant stories appear in cultures worldwide? The biblical account isn't unique. From Greece to Scandinavia, from India to the Pacific Islands, peoples everywhere told stories of enormous beings in ancient times. What does this universal pattern tell us? Let's find out together. Chapter 9. Giants Across the World. Universal Mysteries. The Hebrew texts speak of giants in Canaan, but remarkably, stories of enormous beings appear in nearly every human culture across the globe. This raises a fascinating question. Why would distant peoples with no contact independently develop similar narratives about giants in their ancient past? The Greek tradition presents the Titans, born from the union of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. These primordial beings ruled before the Olympian gods overthrew them. The gigantomachy, the war between gods and giants, forms a central myth in Hellenic culture. These giants weren't merely large humans, but cosmic forces, children of heaven and earth, threatening divine order itself. Notice the parallels to the biblical account. Beings born from the union of sky, heavenly, and earth, human. Creatures who challenged divine authority. A war that ended with their defeat and imprisonment. The Greek story follows a remarkably similar pattern to Genesis and Enoch, though with different names and cultural details. The Norse cosmos contains the Jötnar, often translated as giants, but more accurately described as beings of chaos opposing the gods. They dwell in Jotunheim, one of the 9 worlds. Some possess enormous size. Others appear human in scale, but retain their essential nature as opponents of cosmic order. Interestingly, the gods themselves descend partly from giant bloodlines, creating a complex genealogy that mirrors the ambiguous origins of the Nephilim. Hindu texts describe the Asuras and Daityas, races of beings born from the sage Kashyapa and his wives. These beings possessed great strength and often challenged the gods. Some narratives describe them as enormous in stature. Others focus more on their power and defiance than their physical size. Like the Nephilim, they represent forces that oppose divine order and must be defeated for righteousness to prevail. Polynesian islands preserve stories of giant beings across multiple cultures. While some legends describe small beings, others include tales of enormous warriors and chiefs whose size match their legendary deeds. The specific details vary across the vast Pacific, but the presence of these stories suggests they were important to understanding ancestral history. Chinese mythology contains Pangu, the cosmic giant whose body became the world itself. His breath became wind and clouds. His voice became thunder. His eyes became sun and moon. Though more cosmological than the martial giants of other traditions, Pangu represents the ancient archetype of primordial beings of vast scale. Native American traditions across both continents include stories of giant beings. The Paiute people of the western regions tell of red-haired giants who inhabited caves. The Cherokee speak of spirit people sometimes described as larger than humans. The patterns vary, but the presence of these stories across diverse tribes suggests deep roots in oral tradition. What explains this universal pattern? Scholars have proposed several theories, though none has achieved complete consensus. The psychological interpretation suggests humans naturally create giant figures to personify fear and chaos. Children see adults as giants. Early humans faced megafauna like mammoths and giant ground sloths. The archetype of the threatening large being becomes embedded in storytelling across cultures. The historical interpretation proposes that some populations genuinely grew taller than average through genetics or nutrition. When different groups encountered each other, height differences became exaggerated through oral tradition. A 7-foot warrior becomes 8 feet in retelling, then 9, then 12. Over generations, the exaggeration produces giant legends. The diffusionist theory proposes that giant myths spread from a single source through migration and cultural contact. If the Nephilim story originated in Mesopotamia, it could have traveled along trade routes, adapting to local contexts. This might explain certain similarities while allowing for significant variation. If you're still thinking about these mysteries, I'm curious. Why do you think giant stories appear in every culture? Is it universal human psychology, distant memory of real events, or stories spreading through ancient contact? Share your theory in the comments. What strikes observers most isn't merely the presence of giant beings in mythology, but their consistent role. They represent the old order. They challenge the gods or heroes. They fall, making way for the current age. This narrative structure appears in Greek, Norse, Hindu, and Hebrew texts with remarkable consistency. The giants serve as threshold figures. They mark the boundary between mythic past and historical present. They embody chaos that must be overcome to establish order. Their defeat becomes a founding story, explaining how the current world came to be. Whether these stories preserve memories of actual events or represent universal human psychology remains debated. The archaeological record shows no conclusive evidence of 10-foot humans walking the earth in historical times. Yet the stories persist with striking similarity, carrying weight across millennia and cultures. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between literal history and pure symbol. Maybe some populations were genuinely taller than others, and this difference was magnified through storytelling. Maybe the stories express real human experience of encountering forces that seemed overwhelming, whether those forces were physical people or other challenges. The giant myths connect to something primal in human consciousness. They speak to our relationship with power, with the past, with forces that seem too large to overcome. They remind us that every age believes itself to have conquered the giants of previous eras, never quite certain what new giants might emerge. The universal nature of these stories suggests they address fundamental human concerns. How do we face overwhelming threats? How did the world become the way it is? What happened in the ancient past that shaped everything after? The giants provide answers to these questions. Answers that satisfy something deep in the human need for narrative and meaning. In our next section, we'll examine claims about archaeological evidence for giants, separating fact from fiction and exploring why this evidence matters to people today. The search for giant bones continues to fascinate modern audiences, but does the evidence hold up under scrutiny? We'll find out together as our journey continues. Chapter 10: Ancient Spirits, the Demon Connection. When the flood waters finally receded and the earth began to dry, the physical forms of the Nephilim were gone. The giants had drowned along with all other flesh. Their enormous bodies sank beneath the waves, their strength proving useless against the inexorable rise of water. They were dead. But according to ancient tradition, their story didn't end with their physical death. The Book of Enoch introduces a concept that would profoundly influence Jewish and Christian understanding of evil spirits for centuries. When the giants died, the text suggests their spirits didn't follow the normal path of departed human souls. Human spirits went to Sheol, the realm of the dead, to await judgment. But the spirits of the Nephilim took a different course. Being hybrid creatures, neither fully angelic nor fully human, they didn't fit into established categories. These spirits became what later tradition would call demons, evil spirits, unclean entities, malevolent forces that roamed the earth seeking to harm humanity. According to Enoch, this was both their punishment and their nature. They would remain on earth, disembodied, unable to rest, unable to pass on, compelled to wander and cause suffering until the final judgment. The text describes how these spirits proceed from the bodies of the giants. They emerge as beings of wickedness, causing destruction, attacking, doing damage, creating trouble on the earth. They take no food but remain invisible and rise up against humanity. They cause suffering both physical and spiritual, afflicting people with disease, leading them into sin, spreading corruption wherever they go. This explanation provided answers to questions that troubled ancient believers. Where did demons come from? Why did invisible forces seem to attack and oppress people? What explained the persistence of evil even after wicked people died? The spirits of the dead Nephilim offered a comprehensive answer. These hybrid beings, products of forbidden union, continued their work of corruption even after losing physical form. The giants had been agents of violence and consumption in their physical existence. Their spiritual existence would continue that pattern. They had fed on humans bodily. Now they would attack humans spiritually. They had corrupted the pre-flood world. Now they would attempt to corrupt the post-flood world. Several passages in Scripture seem to reference this tradition without fully explaining it. Job describes Satan roaming through the earth. The Gospels frequently mention demons possessing people or causing illness. The Apostle Paul writes about spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. These references suggest an entire realm of malevolent spiritual beings operating in the world. Early Christian interpreters connected these biblical references to the Enochian tradition. Justin Martyr, writing in the 2nd century, explicitly taught that demons were spirits born from the union of angels and women. Other church fathers agreed. The connection became standard teaching in early Christianity. When believers thought about demons, they thought about the spirits of dead giants. This view explains several features of demons as described in Scripture. They're numerous, which fits if they derive from many giants. They're hostile to humanity, continuing the violence of their physical forebears. They're intelligent and powerful, having inherited angelic knowledge from their watcher fathers. Yet they're not as powerful as angels, being only spirits of hybrid creatures rather than true angels themselves. The demons cannot materialize bodies as angels apparently can. They must possess existing creatures if they want physical expression. This limitation makes sense if they're merely spirits rather than complete spiritual beings. Their disembodied state represents punishment. They lost their physical forms in the flood. They cannot regain them. They can only occupy bodies not their own, and even that temporarily. If you're finding this exploration of ancient beliefs about demons and spirits fascinating, let me know in the comments. Do these ideas help explain evil in the world, or do they raise more questions than they answer? I love hearing different perspectives on these ancient traditions. Jesus' ministry included frequent confrontations with demons. The Gospels record him casting out unclean spirits, commanding them to leave possessed individuals. The demons recognize him, call him Son of God, plead with him not to torment them before the appointed time. These interactions suggest the demons know their ultimate fate, understand that judgment awaits, but resist it as long as possible. One particularly intriguing incident involves demons called Legion, because they are many. When Jesus casts them out of a possessed man, they beg to be sent into a herd of pigs rather than into the abyss. Jesus permits this, and the pigs immediately rush into water and drown. Some interpreters see symbolic significance here. The demons born from giants who drowned drive animals into water. The flood that destroyed their bodies is echoed in this drowning. The Apostle Paul describes spiritual warfare in terms that align with the Enochian tradition. Christians struggle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. This hierarchy of evil spiritual forces could include both fallen angels, like the Watchers, and the spirits of the Nephilim, each category having different roles and capacities. The existence of these evil spirits helps explain the persistence of sin and corruption after the flood. The physical cause of wickedness, the giants themselves, had been destroyed. But spiritual causes continued. The demons remained, working to corrupt the new world as their physical ancestors had corrupted the old. They couldn't devour people physically anymore, but they could still lead them into sin, causing spiritual rather than bodily consumption. This tradition also provided hope. If demons were merely spirits of dead hybrids, they could be resisted. They had limits. They could be cast out. The name of God, prayer, faith, all these proved effective against demonic influence. The demons might be powerful, but they weren't invincible. Believers had tools to combat them, authority to command them to leave, protection through divine power. The Book of Jubilees, another ancient Jewish text, elaborates on this theme. According to Jubilees, after the flood, the demons began leading astray the children of Noah. Noah prayed that these spirits would be bound. The text records that 9/10 of them were indeed bound, cast into judgment, but 1/10 remained free to test humanity. This modification explained why demons remained active in the post-flood world, but weren't overwhelmingly so. Most were bound, limiting their impact. A remnant continued operating, but their numbers were manageable. Humanity faced spiritual opposition, but not insurmountable opposition. Whether taken literally or understood symbolically, the tradition of demons originating from dead Nephilim carries theological weight. It emphasizes that actions have consequences beyond individual lifetimes. The rebellion of the Watchers produced effects continuing for millennia. It suggests that spiritual realities persist even when physical realities change. And it warns that corruption, once introduced, is difficult to eliminate completely. The spirits of the slain giants wandering the earth represent the enduring legacy of cosmic rebellion. They remind us that the story begun in Genesis 6 didn't end with the flood. The waters cleansed the earth of physical corruption, but spiritual contamination remained. The battle between good and evil, between divine order and chaotic rebellion, would continue through history until the final judgment, when all accounts would be settled and every spirit would face its appointed destiny. Chapter 11. Modern Mysteries. Why we still wonder. The ancient story of the Nephilim has experienced a remarkable resurgence in our time. Walk into any bookstore and you'll find novels featuring fallen angels and their giant offspring. Turn on your television and you'll encounter shows exploring these themes. Search online and you'll discover countless videos, articles, and forums dedicated to discussing whether giants once walked the earth. Why has this ancient mystery captured modern imagination so intensely? What is it about beings who lived thousands of years ago, if they lived at all, that continues to fascinate us today? Part of the appeal lies in the mystery itself. The biblical account gives us fragments, not a complete story. We get 4 verses in Genesis, brief mentions later in Scripture, and then silence. That incompleteness invites curiosity. When a story leaves gaps, human imagination rushes to fill them. We can't help but wonder what really happened in those ancient days. The Book of Enoch provides more details, but it raises as many questions as it answers. Were these accounts based on real events or creative interpretation of the Genesis passage? Did the author have access to ancient traditions preserved orally, or was he constructing explanatory mythology? We don't know with certainty, and that uncertainty creates space for endless speculation. Modern culture also finds the concept resonant with contemporary concerns. We live in an age of rapid technological advancement. Genetic engineering is no longer science fiction, but reality. Scientists can modify DNA, create new organisms, blend genetic material in ways previous generations couldn't imagine. This raises profound questions. What does it mean to be human? Where are the ethical boundaries? What happens when we cross lines that perhaps shouldn't be crossed? The Nephilim story speaks directly to these concerns. It's an ancient account of boundaries being violated, of mixing things that shouldn't be mixed, of technology or knowledge advancing beyond wisdom. The giants represent what happens when power isn't matched by ethical restraint. They're a warning from the distant past that feels surprisingly relevant today. The story also addresses our fascination with hidden history. We like to believe there are secrets waiting to be discovered, knowledge that mainstream academia has overlooked or suppressed. The Nephilim fit perfectly into this narrative. They suggest our understanding of the past is incomplete, that mysteries lurk beneath the surface of accepted history. This desire for hidden knowledge isn't new. Humans have always been drawn to secrets and mysteries, but the internet has amplified this tendency. Information spreads instantly. Anyone can present theories without traditional gatekeeping. This democratization of information sharing enables both good and harmful content to reach vast audiences rapidly. Videos claiming to show giant skeletons accumulate millions of views. Most such images are proven hoaxes, often created for digital art contests, but they continue circulating as if authentic. Each sharing adds credibility in viewers' eyes. When mainstream sources debunk these claims, some see it as evidence of cover-ups rather than corrections. Before we go further, I want to ask, are you enjoying this exploration of why ancient mysteries still matter today? If so, hitting the subscribe button helps ensure you don't miss future deep dives into history's most fascinating questions. And if you've made it this far in the video, you're clearly someone who loves thinking deeply about these topics. Leave a comment sharing what aspect of the Nephilim story interests you most. The Nephilim have also become central to various conspiracy theories. Some propose that giant DNA survived the flood and persists in certain bloodlines today. allegedly explaining why particular families maintain power across generations. These theories often merge with older, sometimes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about bloodlines, creating toxic combinations. Others connect Nephilim to claims about secret societies possessing forbidden knowledge inherited from the Watchers. This narrative provides a simple explanation for complex social inequalities, mysterious forces operating behind the scenes, rather than systemic factors requiring nuanced analysis. Ancient astronaut theories continue evolving around the Nephilim. Recent versions propose that the Watchers were extraterrestrial beings, their descent from heaven a landing in spacecraft rather than a fall from grace. The giants become hybrid offspring of human-alien breeding programs. This reading requires ignoring the text's theological context entirely, but captures public imagination nonetheless. Religious communities engage with Nephilim material in varying ways. Some evangelical circles teach about them as literal history and end times prophecy. Books and conferences present these ideas as biblical truth essential for understanding current events, attracting substantial audiences seeking to decode hidden meanings. Other Christian leaders push back, viewing this focus as distraction from core gospel teachings. They argue that obsession with Nephilim speculation pulls believers into sensationalism and away from practical faith. The debate sometimes grows acrimonious, with each side questioning the other's biblical fidelity. Academic conferences on pseudo-archaeology now regularly address Nephilim claims. Scholars examine why these narratives persist and spread. The psychological appeal is clear. They offer simple answers to complex questions, provide a sense of special knowledge, and create communities bound by shared belief in hidden truths. But perhaps the deepest reason the Nephilim story endures is that it addresses timeless human concerns. Every generation faces questions about power and its proper use. Every age encounters forces that seem overwhelming. Every era must decide how to respond when confronted with threats greater than individual human capacity. The giants represent all threats that make us feel like grasshoppers. They embody our fears about facing challenges beyond our strength. And the stories of their defeat provide hope that even overwhelming obstacles can be overcome. That faith and courage can triumph over superior force, that doing what's right matters even when the odds seem impossible. The story also reminds us about consequences. The Watchers made choices that affected not just themselves, but generations after them. Their offspring suffered for decisions they didn't make. The corruption they introduced persisted long after they were imprisoned. Actions have ripples extending far beyond immediate effects. This remains profoundly relevant. The choices we make today about technology, about ethics, about how we treat creation and each other, these choices will echo into the future. The Nephilim story asks us to consider: what boundaries should we maintain? What knowledge should we pursue carefully rather than rashly? How do we ensure our increasing capabilities are matched by growing wisdom? Whether we read the account as literal history, as inspired mythology containing spiritual truths, or as ancient literature reflecting the concerns of its time, the story continues speaking to fundamental human experiences. It addresses fear and faith, power and responsibility, corruption and judgment, destruction and renewal. The Nephilim walked the earth, if they walked at all, thousands of years ago. Yet their story persists because it touches something timeless in human consciousness. It reminds us that some questions never stop being relevant. How should we live? What limits should we observe? What happens when boundaries meant to protect us dissolve? How do we face threats that seem impossible to overcome? These questions don't have simple answers. The ancient text doesn't provide a clear blueprint for modern life. But it invites us to wrestle with these concerns seriously, to think deeply about power and wisdom, capability and character, knowledge and ethics. As you rest tonight, perhaps these ancient mysteries have given you something to contemplate. The story of the Nephilim, whether history or legend or something in between, carries wisdom for those willing to engage it thoughtfully. It warns us about crossing boundaries recklessly. It reminds us that power without righteousness leads to destruction. It tells us that corruption, once introduced, proves difficult to eliminate. And it assures us that even when things seem darkest, even when giants walk the earth, there is hope for renewal, for cleansing, for beginning again. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's most enduring mysteries. May your rest be peaceful, your dreams be pleasant, and your thoughts be filled with wonder at the rich tapestry of ancient wisdom that still speaks to us across the millennia. Until next time, sleep well